In this session, we are very glad to have the opportunity to invite Dr. Lichia Yiu, Yiu Lijia 博士. Dr. Yiu is president of the Center for Socio-Economic Development, which is located in Geneva, Switzerland. And the Center for Socio-Economic Development is a not-for-profit NGO focusing on socio-economic research and the reform of the public sector and the development management. And Dr. Yiu is also a visiting professor at the National Zhengzhi University in Taiwan. And she teaches courses on international human resource management and the globalization and the NGO diplomacy. Is that right, Professor Yiu? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much, 沈院长。不好意思，今天这是我的简报是用英文做的。
It's okay.
你们邀请我来参加。
It's okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hand together to welcome Professor Yiu for her speech.
Thank you very much. Honored to be able to participate in the Good morning, Mr. President, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be able to participate in the 2022 Sixth Sustainable Development and Green Technology International Symposium. My name is Lichia Yiu. The topic I would address today will be focusing on SDG 12 and its impact and demand for green technology. The messages that I would like to convey contain the following 3 points. The triple bottom lines and 2030 agenda. The network of ideas where SDG 12 has been the central of this ideal network, which contains all 17 SDG goals. And lastly, I will address the role of green technology in achieving circularity of the economy, and with some concluding remarks. Besides the impact of COVID and also war in Ukraine, we know there are pressures from 3 different angles on the sustainability of our world. And these mega trends, which you are all very familiar of, and I would not elaborate, but suffice to say that global warming and climate change is becoming more and more pressing and real, with real impact. The second, which we have not discussed as much, but it's about changing demography and how it affects the future labor market, and also demand for new type of services for the aging population. And the third trend, which has impact in terms of the rural areas and rural economy because of the urbanization, the continued concentration of human capital, business opportunities, and economic dynamism. So all these trends would have impact in terms of creating new demand for technology-based products and services and business model without saying that. The SDG has different clusters, and today my talk will focus on the planet, which is part of the 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. And SDG 12 is very much part of this cluster. And you could see the related cluster, components of this cluster is to do with the natural environment, from water to life below water, ocean, to life on land, biodiversity and degradation, to climate action. This particular cluster will have long-term impact in terms of how food security, the ecosystem security, and production of food and distribution will be modeled. Starting point of this conversation would be from the ecological footprint. You could see different production and productive activities related to different sectors in terms of their proportion of land. And the ecological footprint, according to the Mr. Wakanaga, CEO of Global Footprint Network, it is defined as the area of land and water it takes for a human population to generate the renewable resources they consume and degrade the waste it produces in a given technological context. So we're talking about quantity of nature, not only about quality of nature. How we use them and is how much we have. And the term here is biocapacity. If we look at this particular map, a historical trend from 1961 to 2012, you could see that we have very rapidly, within the last 40-some years, moved from surplus to deficit at alarming rate. Put it into the national state context. We could see in the 1961, most countries are actually enjoy ecological reserves, while only a few forerunner of most populous country were facing ecological deficit in 1961. This particular this particular picture has changed since then. And today, this is how it looked. We could see majority of the countries of this world is facing ecological deficit. And what does it mean? It means that either exporting our production units to other countries, so to better exploit and extract natural resources, or to export pollution. And therefore, in today's discussion about SDGs, we start to use the term called spillover effect, meaning a country such as Switzerland on this map is still having ecological reserve, but we export a lot of demand and use and exploitation as well as pollution to other countries. So this picture is raised the question at multiple levels. What are the responsible behavior of a country? What is a responsible conduct of a business? And how do we manage relationship between countries in the totality of this planet? To put the same information into this visualization, smaller the circle, meaning the little of their share of using the global resources. If you look at countries like Switzerland, which is this blue dot, versus Luxembourg, you could see very clearly the use of natural resources is not directly proportional to the population. While the same situation can be seen between Singapore, of a country of 5 million, versus China with 1.4 billion. So this picture gives us a very clear message that there's a lot could be done, and possible solutions is to reconsider our economic model and also reconsider the international relations. Of the same group, the Footprint Network has each year an Earth Overshooting Day. It sounds alarm when we collectively use more resources than what is sustainable and renewable on the planet Earth. You could see today we're using 1.6 Earth of resources. That means increasingly the degradation and depletion is no longer regeneratable by Earth's own capacity. And this is also why we are today talking about how could technology contribute to the SDG 12 to look for a more sustainable consumption and production patterns. Global overshooting, as I already mentioned, it's more than what the world could afford. 60% overdraw. So let me turn the attention in my talk to the SDGs and SDG 12. Essentially, the current situation is demand the world switching its business model to something different. It is moving from cost-focused supply chain to value-focused supply chain. The green circle, which is the old style, which is more linear, is looking for ways to squeeze the cost down to continues to increase efficiency. Although experiences from Taiwan has shown it is possible, but the margin of gain is diminishing and getting smaller. While the SDGs 12 is proposed and circular economy is proposed a value-focused supply chain, meaning that we would go through from innovation and adoption of appropriate technology so we can create more value to be distributed among society and people and companies. What are the challenges confronting the business in terms of switching over to a more sustainable business model, i.e. a circular economy? Besides the challenge of collaboration within the firms, these are the following challenges. How do you align the performance measurement with incentives? How do you measure and monitor the progress and the various business activities? And how do you communicate to the consumers, the customers, and also regulators and other supervisors? So these are considered to be substantial barriers, but it's not impossible to overcome. What SDG monitor is showing us today, the material actually recycled, for example, concerning electronic waste. At this moment, it's less than 20% is actually recycled. Although we heard Apple bravely announced its intention of using 100%, making its iPhone 100% recyclable, but we don't know whether it's true or not. And the second thing is that the state, the government, continues to subsidize the fossil fuel to make the use of gas, oil artificially low instead of covering its true cost, which has to include the social cost, environment cost that has been externalized. And so we could see that this is also a disincentive for the switchover. Well, we see that the unsustainability of the world continues. One spot of light of COVID is that reduced economic activities and mobilities have contributed to some decline of the consumption of the natural resources. So the question to all the stakeholders from government to business and to communities and people is that how can we fashion a recovery plan which is not going to bring us back to the old path of continued unfettered economic growth at the expense of environment, but rather find a way to couple the economic growth with environmental sustainability or ecological sustainability. In this context, I would like to highlight, which I already mentioned, that as sustainable consumption and production, SDG 12, is central in terms of promoting, achieving, and attain the vision and the final goals of the 2030 agenda. You could see from this indication, of course, SCP has a lot to do with oceans and growth and employment, but equally, the sustainable consumption and production could also link with health sector, which is already happening. And for example, in terms of the material use of the mask making. So, just to remind, there is a strong link between the Goal 12 with some other ecologically connected SDGs. I have already, and also Raymond in his presentation, mentioned the SDG goals within the 2030 agenda. So let me not restate the point. SDG 12 contains different elements. It contains 10 targets and 13 indicators. I have listed them here, so you could have a quick view, but it's also available on the website that's specifically dedicated to Goal 12. (12.5), which is of particular interest in terms of this presentation, it's about substantially reduce waste generation. So how can we think of more innovative design that allow us to use less resource input and also create less waste? And also 12.7, which is about promoting public procurement to kick off a circular economy cannot be only the effort of the business or the push of the community. Rather, the state, the government can do a lot through its procurement policy by encouraging or advantage the more sustainable production methods and use of material and also waste treatment. As we all know, public procurement is a very important budget item in most countries. It is actually the main buyer of a particular economic system. As reducing the waste and resource consumption, I think it is obvious that people also have to be part of the plan. People also need to reconsider their lifestyle choice and also the selection of consumer goods. If you look at the example of Switzerland, it is possible to achieve 100% fair trade for the bananas and for coffee. So with proper communication and campaign, it is possible to change the consumer behavior and favor the more sustainable products. And the 12.8 will be very relevant to the audience of today, is to support the different actors to develop scientific and technological capacities to move towards more sustainable patterns of consumption and production. The last one is, I have mentioned, it's about inefficient fossil fuel subsidies that encourage wasteful consumption. It creates market distortion. So we also need to consider how to restructure taxation and phase out those harmful subsidies where they exist. At the same time, protect the poor and the affected communities. So the burden of transition will not be disproportionately on their shoulders. Why is SDG 12 important? In my previous narration and argumentation, they are important for the following reasons. Let me summarize. One, it is essential for reconcile economic, social, and environmental objectives and decoupling greenhouse gas emission from economic growth and other unfavorable environmental impact. And it also have secondary impact on the poor community who tend to live in the more ecologically vulnerable and more polluted areas. Second point is to ensure the respect for the biophysical boundaries of the planet and to reduce current global consumption rates. If you think of 50% of the fashion, ready-to-go fashion each year produced goes into landfill, that is very disturbing. If we think of the food waste, for example, 50% of the food in Switzerland goes into incinerator, or the fact that a lot of fishing, especially bottom trawling for less valuable fish, ends up not on the plate of human beings, but rather in the animal feed. That's also disturbing. So there is a lot of room for improvement and changing our collective behavior. So the SDG 12 is there to promote resource and energy efficiencies, sustainable infrastructure, and provide access to basic services, green and decent jobs for all. So I'm calling here on the science technology community with universities and business to work on greener technology so that we could achieve this inspiration. Let me conclude by saying the following. What is green technology? This is what I found from a research paper. It says it is a technology which is environmental friendly, developed and used in such a way so that it doesn't disturb our environment and conserves natural resources. So it is also known as environmental technology and clean technology. And if we look at this slides from the World Green Building Council, it indicates how could building and the construction sector contribute to this SDG 12. And the green buildings using circular principles where resources aren't wasted could be a very interesting place to start. Especially we know the use of sand has made many coastal areas unsafe. and also creates a lot of cement sector, also creates a lot of pollution. So here it's my last remark. I look at green technology from the following perspective. Technology will help the communities to do the following: reduce greenhouse gas emission so that we can achieve passively carbon neutral or more aggressively carbon zero. Second is to enhance the recyclability of materials used, such as parts or waste, or possible for repurpose. The third is about moving away from a business model that encourage to own and to trash, to share and leasing, so that product lifespan can be produced, but business would earn money and create new values through other means by changing the relationship between the business and the consumer. So that green technology will enable us all to reduce our individual and collective footprints. And therefore, we could slow down the climate change as hoped and arrest it at 1.5 centigrade and allow our children and grandchildren to live in a more sustainable environment rather than facing the possibility only a few would live in a sustainable environment while the rest would suffer from all the negative consequences that are left behind. So if you want more information, these are the websites of our center. You will find policy papers, academic research papers, and other materials on our websites. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you and to share, our experience, reflections, and thoughts. Once again, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your speech, Professor Yiu, right? And I think it's a very impressive speech, and I think that all participants will learn a lot from your speech. And due to the limitation of time, I think that only one question is allowed. Okay, President Lin. President Lin.
Thank you very much for your wonderful something about your center. Like your center is social, economic, and economic development. What is the meaning of that? You emphasize a lot about the society balance or something, or what? Can you hear me?
Sorry, I missed your question.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay. As I understand that you are the president of Center for Social, Economic, Development, right?
Yes, we are 28 years old and has been accredited by the UN ECOSOC.
Yeah, right. Is that UN organization, one of the UN organization, part of UN organization or what?
No, we're not part of the United Nations, but we are recognized as a contributor to the policy debate of the UN system. So it is accredited by the United Nations Council of Economic and Social Affairs.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And that's why we could participate.
Okay, thank you. And welcome to Nanhua University. Whenever you got a chance.
I beg your pardon?
Okay.
Welcome to Nanhua
Well,
University.
thank you very much, President Lin, because we did meet before, even when you were the Minister of Education. So that was quite some years ago.
You know, at the Nanhua University, we did provide implementation of SDGs. And probably in the future, we can have some dialogue, especially to learn something about the SDGs.
Yes, it will be a great pleasure to meet you again. But I also will take the liberty of the moment to make a little publicity announcement. I have curated a conference for the United Nations Office on Sustainable Development. It will start next week. So I will forward information to Amit. So just in case people are interested. And I would encourage the voice from Taiwan in this international forum, because since it's the COVID, one of the things that has happened, one of the advantage or benefits that has taken place is that many of these events are much more open and accessible.
Okay, thank you. And this is our last session, and I think that I wish that all our participants please give your hand to Professor Yu and also to yourself. Okay.